On our wedding day, he held my hands, smiled, and said, "I'm glad things worked out this way." I smiled back, but deep down, I knew I was never his first choice. Maybe in another life, he would have loved me first, chosen me without hesitation. But in this one, I was just the one who stayed. I'm 31F and struggling with my 32M fiancé's frugality, making me unsure about marrying him. I met my fiancé 3 years ago. When we met, he had been out of an abusive marriage for 2 years. One of the biggest aspects of that abuse was financial. His ex-wife drained him completely. She made him buy expensive jewelry only to either give it away or destroy it after arguments. Designer clothes, luxury shoes, extravagant vacations, high-end cars, and a massive house. If she wanted it, he paid for it. And when they divorced, she took even more, leaving him with almost nothing. Despite this, my fiancé is extremely wealthy. He earns well into the 6 figures, nearing 7, and on top of that, he inherited several million from his grandfather. His parents also gifted him and his siblings a substantial amount of money. So, while the financial abuse was severe, he isn't struggling financially. He has more money than he could ever need. Last year, I moved into his house. While I don't pay rent, I do split the bills and cover groceries. I also buy my own clothes and jewelry. I have a stable job and am fully capable of supporting myself. However, things have taken a turn for the worse, and I'm feeling increasingly unhappy. When I first moved in, his house was practically empty. Most of the furniture was secondhand, he had only a few pieces of silverware, and he refused to turn on the heating, leaving the house cold and damp. There were no curtains, no decorations. His ex had taken everything that wasn't nailed down, and he was too frugal to replace it. It was shocking to see $1 million home in such a state. I'm grateful for the opportunity to live in his house, something I could never afford on my own. But I didn't want to live in such bleak conditions. So, I started buying kitchen essentials and furniture, but eventually, I realized I was constantly dipping into my savings while he did nothing. I looked into getting curtains, but with so many windows, the cost was overwhelming. At that point, I decided I couldn't keep paying for everything myself. I told him I needed a fund to furnish his house. He blew up at me that I was just with him for his money. I pointed out all the money I spend on his house. The gifts and the trips because he pays for nothing ever. Because he wants to be sure I am not here for the money. The fact is, if we break up I have nothing, the house is not mine. If I spend all my savings on his house I will be left with absolutely nothing. He wants a prenup and I am fine with that, but I can't help but feel used. On top of that, I feel jealous of his ex-wife. She was treated like royalty, while I feel neglected. He proposed to her on a cruise with a $10,000 white gold diamond ring, while I got a rhodium-plated Swarovski ring that might be worth $100. The proposal itself happened at a picnic that I organized, paid for, and spent hours cooking for. I was so disappointed that I almost said no. However, I'm afraid to bring this up because I don't want to be called a gold digger. But I also don't want to be the one funding a millionaire's lifestyle. He loves everything, as long as I pay for it. The moment he has to spend, it suddenly becomes frivolous and unnecessary. If I have to live frugally, I'd rather do it on my own. At least then, I wouldn't have the weight of knowing there are literal millions just sitting there while I struggle. I'd simply be paying for my own lifestyle. Would I be wrong for calling off a wedding purely for financial reasons? Because I love this man, but when I imagine our cheap wedding compared to his ex's extravagant one, I worry. Will our future children have any luxuries, or only if I pay for them? If I ever become a stay-at-home mom, will I have to beg just to turn on the heating? Edited to answer common questions. I know for certain that his past abuse was real. His family and friends have told me separate stories of what they witnessed, confirming it. If anything, she was even worse than I thought. She even stole heirloom jewelry from his grandmother, who had Alzheimer's, right after she was widowed, and pretended she was gifted those things, even though everyone knew his grandmother despised her. I didn't realize at first that he's doing to me what she did to him, subconsciously punishing me for what she put him through. I'm not trying to force him into a lifestyle he wasn't already open to. Before I moved in, He told me he left his house in such a state because he was depressed after his ex took everything, even the curtains. He said it made him sad and that he wanted a cozy home, he just didn't know where to start. His house is paid off, thanks to Granddad. He isn't actually spending much on utilities either, house is very well isolated and has solar panels. It is weird to see how cheap being rich really is. I am not asking for designer furniture. IKEA all the way, and I have refurbished second-hand furniture myself. I am actually pretty thrifty. I see where my jealousy over the her lifestyle might have triggered some people. Let me explain. A $10,000 ring is insane and stupid to me. I do not want that because I would fear for losing it every day. I don't need an over-the-top wedding, however, it almost feels like for her he did effort. Wanted to give her what made her happy. Put effort and thought in it. With me it almost feels like he wants to prove how little he can give me. He described his vision for the wedding, and it's even cheaper than the one my financially struggling cousin had. I can't shake the feeling that he wants to prove just how little he can spend on me. I'm already dreading the comparisons from family members who attended both weddings. I don't want to feel like the discount wife. I hate to say it, but it almost seems like he enjoys this on some level. At this rate, we might as well be washing and reusing paper plates. I did bring up the idea of selling the mansion, which I honestly don't need, so we could move to a more modest home, especially since his ex was the one who chose this house. But he refuses. He says he loves this house, but for me, it's overwhelming to live in a place I could never afford. And the sheer number of massive windows. It's just too much. I haven't spoken to him about it yet, but I know I need to pause the wedding and insist on counseling. In the meantime, I've already started looking for an individual therapist because I've realized I might be too much of a people pleaser, letting him control me while still being haunted by the shadow of his ex. I also plan to separate for a while. I'm looking for a short-term rental so I can get some space and clear my head. I took the day off and went to therapy, hoping to calm my racing thoughts. Therapy confirmed what many of you suspected, I'm a people pleaser. I wanted to save him, and I've internalized the idea that any effort or money I expect him to spend on me makes me a gold digger. I'll be attending weekly sessions to work on myself. I also realized that I would have never accepted this kind of treatment from any of my exes, even though I earn more than them. But with him, I felt like I had to prove I was worthy of being with a millionaire, that I wasn't just after his money. That mindset got to me early on. I called one of his siblings, someone I'm close with, and told her everything. She wasn't surprised, just sad about how unhappy I was. She revealed that from the start, he believed I was out of his league. He couldn't understand why I wanted to be with him and assumed it must be because of his money. She even admitted that she had already spoken to him before about treating me better. She was furious when she heard about the proposal. Hearing this left me feeling a little confused, and honestly, a bit hurt. I wish she had told me sooner, but she said she didn't think it was her place. She also shared how she and her husband manage their finances, which helped give me some perspective since he also earns less than she does. I decided to use this opportunity to pack a bag. I haven't found a new place yet, but I'm going to stay with my parents for now. I've made up my mind, I need at least 6 months apart to sort myself out. I loaded my things into my car because, truthfully, I had no idea how the conversation with him would go. And then came the hardest part, the talk. I waited for him to come home. He was pretty late, but I couldn't go another night pretending everything was fine while all of this was eating me up inside. I had written down what I wanted to say. I have never been so scared before. I didn't want to hurt him and I didn't know how he would react. I took some advice from here. I opened that I was moving out and that I wanted to pause our engagement. He was very quiet and just sat down. I told him he really hurt me by calling me a gold digger and that I am done walking on eggshells and feeling guilty for just wanting basic things. I told him I was unhappy and felt neglected. I also told him that after 3 years of me showing up for him he still doesn't think I am here for him. It is not going to happen. He just sat there in silence. He didn't say a word. I told him that constantly comparing me to his ex was toxic and unfair. Punishing me for her mistakes was abusive. His comparisons had even made me start comparing myself to her, questioning whether she was somehow more valuable than me. The irony was that one of the things he resented about her was her ungratefulness. He used to do nice things for her, but it was never enough. Yet with me, he doesn't do anything at all, and I'm expected to be grateful for the privilege of picking up the tab. I told him he wasn't ready for marriage. That I dreaded having children with him and living like this. That I didn't trust he would take care of me if I ever became a stay-at-home mom. And at that point, I just said it. I called him abusive and a user. Saying everything out loud made me angry, and I started losing my composure and straying from what I had planned to say. He still didn't react. No emotion, no response. I sat in the silence for a moment, but since he had nothing to say, I decided to leave. Only when I got up to go did he finally speak. He said, "Please don't go." Then he asked if I was just pausing the wedding or canceling it entirely, if it was truly over or if he still had a chance. I told him I needed to leave. I didn't want to live in what felt like his ex's palace of sadness anymore. I needed him to go to therapy, especially financial therapy. I needed space, a real separation. I told him I'd consider couples counseling, but only if he started individual therapy first. He begged me not to go through with the separation, but I knew I needed it. I just told him to think about everything, and then I walked out. That's when he finally showed some emotion. He was crying by the time I left. Sometime in the early morning, he sent me a long text. He said he was a wreck, that he couldn't sleep. He made a lot of promises. He'd go to therapy, sell the house, buy a smaller one, and make sure I was always taken care of. He said he'd help decorate so we could create a home together. And once again, he begged me to come home. But to me, that place never felt like home. Right now, I just feel drained and exhausted. I slept most of the day. I feel guilty, but also a little relieved, if that even makes sense. I don't know if I want to go back, even if he follows through on everything he promised. I just need time to process. I'll go back for my kitchen supplies and my TV, but nothing else. This is exactly why I didn't want to furnish the place in the first place. His house is massive, so everything in it is oversized. I wouldn't even be able to take the couch if I wanted to. As I said, I left. Right now, I'm looking for an apartment within my budget, and my parents are helping me out. I'm staying with them while I save up. I'm not shutting the door completely, but for now, we're broken up. We have no contact. In the first week after I left, he transferred a large sum of money into my account. It really rubbed me the wrong way. It just proved that he still thought money was the reason I stayed. I deducted the cost of the couch I left behind and sent the rest back. After that, I asked for no contact. He's respected my request, and honestly, I feel free. I used to feel guilty for wanting simple things, like being taken out every once in a while. But the longer I'm away, the more I realize just how much I was being mistreated. I have an autoimmune condition, and the cold in that house would trigger flare-ups. Even knowing that, he kept turning the heat down. He would rather see me miserable than spend an extra $100 a year. The last thing I heard is that he put the Palace of Sadness on the market. I've even seen the listings, so I'm glad he's actually following through. His sister told me he's in therapy now, which I think is a good thing. I hope he keeps it up. He's keeping his promises so far, but I need to see real change, and even then, I don't know if it would be enough. Right now, I'm focused on rebuilding my life. I'm even thinking about getting a puppy. If I ever give him another chance, it would have to be a completely fresh start, no picking up where we left off. I want to start dating again and take things slowly. Therapy has been a huge help. I can see now that I brought a lot of this on myself by constantly people-pleasing, always trying to save him, wanting so badly for him to be happy that I completely forgot about myself. Never again. After being in a home where I was truly loved, my parents, I realized how sad, cold, and alone I had been. Over time, I went blind for a lot of things. Blind to a comfortable home temperature. Comfortable with thinking about every penny spent. Feeling guilty for buying that dress I wanted for so long that was finally on sale. Feeling entitled for wanting date nights, being treated sometimes. I started to think about what makes me happy. I love to travel, dress up to go to a nice restaurant, throw dinner parties, entertain people, think about Christmas gifts 6 months in advance, have a cozy house. And I realized just how much he had taken from me with that one little sentence. Is that really necessary? Is anything ever? If you have a roof, food, bed, and a TV, you are there, right? Is travel necessary? Is having nice clothes necessary? Is a shower necessary? A haircut? A party? A hobby? A wedding? No. I know now that abusers are not per definition bad people. He is broken and he has trauma I have no time or energy for. He got free from abuse and decided to become the abuser. I know he is in therapy and we initially agreed on 6 months no to low contact. But I felt I was certain it was not for me anymore and I didn't want to keep him dangling. Breaking up with him was incredibly difficult. It made me deeply sad. I never wanted to hurt him. I truly loved him. I had hoped we would be each other's happy ending. We both came from dark places, and I wanted us to grow and thrive together. His family always told me I was the one, everything he had been looking for, and I felt so lucky. But we only get one life, and he has a lot of work to do before he can even meet the bare minimum of what I need. I feel like I've failed, like my story didn't get the happy ending I wanted. I feel broken and sad. But I'm giving myself time to just be me, and I hope he's doing the same. I truly hope he finds someone who makes him happy. More than anything, I hope that for myself. But for now, I'm enough, just me and my pup. Looking back, I can finally admit that I was in a financially abusive relationship. It took time for me to get comfortable using the word abuse. I resisted it for so long because he never yelled at me, hit me, or called me names. Instead, he used manipulation, always comparing me to his abusive ex, using my own kindness against me to make me fall in line. I drained my limited savings on furniture, luxuries, and nights out for a man who had more money than I could even comprehend, just to feel like I deserved basic comfort. I spent so much energy proving I wasn't a gold digger that I forced myself to have no needs at all. I lived in a freezing house, bought him everything he wanted, and somehow had less than ever, while being with someone who had so much. Leaving was terrifying. I struggled to stand by my decision, afraid of facing life alone, of having to carefully manage every penny. And he knew that. He said all the right things, he went to therapy, pleaded for me to come back. It rattled me, made me second-guess myself, made me wonder if I was making a mistake. But a few things kept me going. My colleagues, who are more like friends than co-workers, knew every detail of my story. When I left, they hugged me and told me how proud they were. Their support was so genuine that it rubbed off on me. I felt proud too, and I couldn't let them, or myself, down by going back. One night, my boss passed by my office when I was working late and casually said, "Never give men second chances. They never change. You deserve someone who gets it right from the start." I don't know what made him say that to me, but those words stuck. My trainer, who knew some of my struggles, put it bluntly, "You gave everything and got less than nothing in return. It's like giving me $100, and instead of paying you back, I take another $100 from your wallet. Why would you accept that deal again? He owes you a debt he can never repay, not in money, but in emotional energy, love, and kindness." And then, I came across something that hit me hard. Don't wake up in the same miserable place 10 years from now just because you were afraid to make the change today. Now, I've bought my own apartment. At times, I felt like a tiny mouse surrounded by people who make my entire monthly salary in just a few days. But the truth is, I have a great job. I earn well, far above average. I have a beautiful home, furnished the way I like, and I can even afford to care for a puppy. I may live alone, but I feel infinitely warmer and happier than I ever did in that relationship. I love myself more. I no longer carry guilt for wanting a cozy home, for wanting to go out to dinner sometimes. And most of all, I am so grateful I pulled myself out of that relationship. I stuck to my decision. I moved forward. And I am free. The money is gone, and I have no intention of fighting to get it back. At one point, he even got petty and demanded that I pay rent for the time I lived with him. That was my cue to block him. I had no interest in reopening that discussion. Whatever. Lesson learned. I might not have millionaire status, but I'm doing just fine. For a while, I actually got along well with his sister. We shared a hobby and bonded over it. But ever since I went public with my new boyfriend, she's been noticeably distant. Maybe she was holding on to hope that things would work out between me and her brother. I really don't know. But she's definitely grown colder. Now, about this man, wow. People always say, never settle, there's someone better out there for you. I never believed it. Honestly, I was fully prepared to embrace my fate as a crazy dog lady for the rest of my life. I was genuinely happy being single. My friends encouraged me to start dating again, just to get back in the swing of things. He was my third date, and I only went because they pushed me into it. I wasn't interested at all. But the moment I saw him in person, OMG. Sparks flew like never before. I'm in my 30s. I thought I had experienced it all. But this was something else entirely. He is everything my ex wasn't. He's kind, thoughtful, and caring. He cooks for me. He actually appreciates the gifts I give him, gets flustered but genuinely grateful. He treats me to dinners and refuses to let me split the bill. Even before we were officially together, he was planning and booking dates and trips months in advance. He surprises me with gifts, not because he has to, but because he wants to. He's not as wealthy as my ex, but he earns a good living, comparable to mine. And yet, he treats me like a queen. And between you and me, and anyone else scrolling this far down in the comments, the lovemaking is insane. I guess when someone is naturally giving, they give everywhere. So please, if you take one thing away from my story, let it be this: never settle. Ever. Trust the process, babe.